be a civil servant, you have to have a really, really long resume. Like my long resume is like 10 pages. That's
Mamma
not
mia.
what I know.
Mamma
That's
mia.
not,
It's a
I
book.
did not have, I know.
Fifth episode of this podcast series, and the fifth guest is Rachel Soobitsky. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Thanks for accepting our invitation. So, first question, as usual, is a very bold question. Who are you and what do you do?
That is a bold question. So as you mentioned, my name is Rachel Soobitsky. I live in Maryland in the United States, and I work at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is a NASA center. And I will get into more about what I do currently, but I like to call myself an environmental scientist. I like to use GIS to solve environmental related problems. All of my past jobs have been the environmental science field or topic. And I have 2 cats, if you're talking about who I am outside of work. And I enjoy reading and hiking and, I live near Washington, D.C., so going out and seeing the monuments and all of that in my free time, but definitely just really passionate about the work that I do currently and just the past few jobs, and definitely excited to talk to you about it more today.
Yeah, thanks. So, you are a NASA. And of course, I want to talk how also you got there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading some of your, let's say, career through LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw you essentially your expertise is in GIS. Huh? You started working at NOAA
Mm-hmm.
initially.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Sorry.
say I can talk about the path a little bit because it was
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
different. My background, I got a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and Policy with my concentration in land use. So took a lot of geography-like classes, and I had a minor in sustainability. So that's what I graduated undergrad with, and I got my first job as a layout foreman, which basically it's construction for a stream restoration company. So we were out there revitalizing streams, which was really cool just to be out in the nature and like have the hands-on experience with different, water quality issues and helping rebuild the streams that have degraded over time. So that was my first job, and after about a year, I decided to go back to grad school to get my master's in GIS. I had only taken 2 GIS classes in my undergrad career, and I was really interested in those classes. I thought they were really fun and different. So I kind of took a leap of faith and thought, having this GIS degree, I think will benefit me with the topic of environmental science and find it interesting because not everyone finds school interesting. Those are the classes that really excited me. Looking back, I'm really glad that I made that decision. I think it's only helped my career. Every job I've had since going back for my master's in GIS has been GIS related, so definitely was beneficial. It also taught me some coding languages and just the basics of coding, which is also definitely beneficial, I think, in any technical field. So while I was getting my master's in GIS is when I worked at NOAA, like you mentioned, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's what the acronym stands for. And I was a contractor there for maybe 8 months. And, I was still getting my degree. So it was definitely still new for me and my first actual job, like doing GIS. So I was one of 2 GIS workers on like an engineering project within NOAA. So I did a few maps and cartographic related things for that engineering team. And the engineering project was definitely over my head at the time, but it was still, getting your foot in the door, meeting a lot of people and applying GIS in the real world setting. And then after that, I actually worked at NASA at an internship. It's called NASA Develop. So that was a 10-week internship, which it's very environmental science related and GIS remote sensing related projects. So it's like exactly the 2 things I wanted to do, environmental science, remote sensing, GIS together. And at my dream job, which was NASA, for a 10-week internship. And I was like, man, it's only 10 weeks. I was definitely sad when it ended, but it was really cool because you work on a team and you do a project and that has a real world end user. Like they work with partners that actually hopefully use the results of your project in the real world. So I had that 10-week internship, and then that ended. And that's when I got a job at a nonprofit called the Chesapeake Conservancy, which their whole, I guess, their goals were to help with water quality in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is a really large watershed in the U.S. East Coast. There's a pollution diet that the counties and states have to follow, and it's a way to use remote sensing and GIS to map, how is the water flowing over the land? Where are there trees or no trees? Where can we plant trees to make the biggest impact on the ground over a large area? So I was doing high resolution land cover, land use change mapping. And that is where when I graduated grad school, I continued working there for the next 4 years. I started out as a GIS analyst, which I think a lot of people will start out as, and then ended up as a project manager and then a program manager. So I got my experience with managing technical projects. So that's I think a lot of people will find in their career paths with GIS, you'll kind of at one point see you usually have to choose project management of technical projects or be analyst person doing the analysis. So I kind of had that earlier on in my career, and I had mentors that thought maybe it's too soon to go into management because you just started as the analyst part, but I did go the management path. And I was still able to do analysis work as well, so I didn't totally forget everything I learned, which was good. And then I applied for this job back at NASA Goddard. And, this was a topic, this is, if I haven't mentioned it yet, but with the NASA disasters program, so working with natural hazards, and totally something that I hadn't done before. It was mostly, my background so far had been water quality usually. So this was a different topic, but I applied the things I learned in my past jobs to this job and to the interview to prove that I had the skills to learn this topic and apply the skills to be able to do the job successfully. So now I'm back at Goddard, and that was, like I said, that was my dream job, being from Maryland and being close by to Goddard Space Flight Center, knowing they have a really large earth science department. It's always been my dream, so I made it back. So yeah, that was my long-winded explanation of kind of where and how I got here.
I have a question. You say you started with a GIS program at the university, and then the remote sensing, this side of it, which sometimes is connected, but was something that later on you developed an interest on, or something you learned on the job? How did it
I think
work?
At least with the degree that I did, it's called geospatial information science. However, there were remote sensing classes within that, and the coding classes, like I mentioned. But I do think most of what I learned was on the job at Chesapeake Conservancy, since we were using aerial imagery and LiDAR to create those land cover, land use, and change maps. So that's really where I got my first real hands-on experience. And I would say as advice for others, that's definitely where I've gained the most, was real jobs and internships and all of that. Applying the knowledge in a practical way is that's where it connects, at least for me, more than assignments and lab work and things like that. So I definitely recommend getting that hands-on real world experience.
And you say also during this job, you were, especially when you were working on water quality, land cover, some of these were essentially a requirement from what I understood, or legislative requirement. Is that correct?
Yeah, with the nonprofit, yeah.
Okay, so it's and it's the requirement related also to use satellite data. It might be a silly question, huh? Or so do you think the use of Earth observation is now also getting so on and on, developing so much, also because of the legislative requirement, the law, essentially?
Yeah, that is definitely a good question, and I don't know enough about it to answer fully, but I can give my opinion,
Yeah,
which
we
I do
want you.
think I know that the aerial imagery that we used in the United States is called NAPE. It's the National Agriculture Imagery Program, and it's flown every 2 years or 3 years over the continental United States. And that's something that it's with the USDA, I believe, and that's something that they have to get funding for, and they have to show that it's being used for beneficial products. So the land cover that my old team created was freely available for anybody to use. We wanted those use cases. We were collecting feedback. How was this beneficial to the work that you were doing, so that we could say, this is important. We do use it, and here are all the reasons why we should continue this program. So I know there's that aspect, which gets at your question a little bit. And I could list off a bunch of benefits. We save people a ton of time from going out and counting how many trees are here, or how many, where's the land eroding, and where can we put green infrastructure. It does save time for people to not send out people in the field every time. It saves hours. I think there's definitely benefits for the satellite data, earth observation, aerial imagery, for sure.
And then, of course, you say you had an internship, NASA, and then later on you went and worked there. Were the two things related in the way that did the internship helped you? And then how it worked, the application process at NASA? Because probably people will be interested in general.
Yeah, so the NASA Develop program, there's a NASA interns I don't know the exact website, interns.nasa.gov maybe, that there's a ton of internship programs at NASA, a lot of it for students or recent graduates. So I actually found out about them through a career day, or when they have a bunch of different booths with different jobs that come in. Yeah, so that's how I first met them and applied. And then I believe it did help getting this job, because they saw that was on my resume. And they saw NOAA, which is another, government agency. So they see you have that experience. And I do know, I found out after I got this job that they did reach out to my old mentors at the internship program, just, ask how was I, did I perform well and all of that. So I do think having that internal opinion, which was good, because, they always call your references, but it's nice to have someone that has worked with you that they know personally. And I'm a contractor through a company called Science Systems and Applications, Inc. We call it SSAI for short. So NASA has a lot of contractors. There's some people that work through University of Maryland, College Park, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. There's Booz Allen. There's a bunch of contracting companies that hire to fill roles at NASA. So I am considered a contractor, although my office is at NASA. My name's on a door there. That's where I sit when I'm at the office. I'm paid through SSAI, and they manage me. So that's just a little bit of background of working at NASA. I would say it's more likely you'll get hired through a contracting company once you're in the door. Usually you can make connections, hopefully. And if a civil servant, that's what we call the government positions, if that opens up, then at least you're already in, people know you, and that can help get you to be a government employee. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know, I think to work, for example, USGS, the United States Geological Survey, you need to be an American citizen. Is the same also for NASA? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, not for contractors, at least. Because I definitely know of a few that are, not U.S. citizens who work for a contractor and are at NASA. They have an office next to mine. I'm not a civil servant or government employee, so I can't speak for that. But definitely as a contractor. Which is good.
And do you the process itself, was that challenge? You say, of course, it helped you, your internship and the personal relationship you developed. But aside from that, is that, definitely, of course, working with NASA, for NASA, it's probably, when you talk about earth science, is one of the first, probably the first. But how challenging is getting there?
Yeah, I think
some process.
Yeah, it actually wasn't as bad as I guess you might think. It's scary
Okay.
sounding, but I mean, I had an interview first with the contracting company, and then the next interview was with
Mm,
who would be my boss at NASA,
mm.
and I think that was it, two interviews.
Okay.
Um, so that wasn't too bad because I know sometimes it can take a long, like, can do three or four interviews, and you'll do a test and you'll do all that.
Mm,
But this was just
yeah.
two interviews maybe, and calling my references and all of that. So I thought it was a smooth process, but I know to be a civil servant, you have to have a really, really long resume. Like mine, my long resume is like 10 pages. That's
Mamma
not
mia.
what I know.
Mamma
That's
mia.
not,
It's a
I did
book.
not have, I know. It's everything for the last 10 years in
Yeah.
detail. And like, you have to give like tangible metrics and things like that. But
Okay.
that's not what I use for this job. This job, it
Okay.
was my one or two page resume
Okay.
that, short and sweet and to the point. But
That's
yeah,
this, you say 10 pages. So it's apart from this job, it's a regular things in the US having such a, let's
that's not
say,
normal. I think
okay.
that's maybe,
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that's just for, I know, just for the
Okay.
government jobs, I think.
Okay.
That's,
But
and
still, because,
yeah,
sorry.
it is very long. And I
Okay.
just made myself create one actually because it's good to have and it's
Okay.
a long, so, you don't want to, you might push it back, but it's hard to
Yeah.
remember the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Especially if like I switched jobs a lot in the beginning because I was doing different jobs in grad school.
Yeah.
So trying to remember back of all those
Mm,
details that you usually kind of filter out from your short resume because you
mm,
can't have that much. So it's definitely
yeah.
good to save all those details somewhere, at least if you ever have to elaborate more on
Okay.
what you did on your last.
I
Yeah,
didn't expect that. And
I know,
here in
surprise.
the UK, for yeah, even civil service job, it's
Yeah,
usually quite short. Even if they ask for the CV, usually they say no more than 2 pages.
really, that's
And yeah,
nice.
it's very
Well,
pragmatic. I love it. Love it.
10 pages might just be me because
Okay,
maybe
no, no, no.
I
We
type too
respect.
much.
At least you have stuff to talk about. That's important.
That's true. That's true.
And also, you saw one of my doubt. I keep telling my parents. I'm originally from Italy. I don't know if in case you didn't guess, but there are some civil service job in Italy. It's very strongly based on recommendation,
Yeah,
and all the stress about the application for. I mean, you are not working at
yeah.
NASA. I would expect if you work at NASA, you have
You would
several
know somebody
steps.
or
In Italy, it's a mess. Civil service job,
yeah.
yeah, it's a long process, a lot of applicants.
And
But
that could be the case since I'm not a government, like I'm not a
okay,
civil servant. So I guess maybe if I was, I would have
okay,
something different. Maybe it is a
okay,
longer process, but through a contracting company, it was pretty smooth.
okay,
But I do agree, like I've been lucky in the sense that I don't think I've never like known somebody at the organization that helped like recommend me. I do think I got lucky in the sense that like I was able, it's hard to stand out. There's a lot of applications out there nowadays. So I think
yeah.
trying to make sure you match like some of the keywords that are in the application in the first place helps because I think sometimes people might use the AI to filter out because there's too
Yeah.
many to go through. But I do know it is very good to know people, of course, like that definitely helps.
Okay.
So yeah,
And how is working there in the US in general? I would say both NASA and US because the impression I have also I was there just few times, so I don't have
yeah,
enough experience. But the work is hectic there. It's crazy. I mean, people work a lot. So it might be, I don't know, I have the university experience, but
yeah.
I saw also offices with bunk bed in it because people were too far to
Not,
travel. And that's something I think as a European is shocking. But
yeah, I have also heard that it's a lot better work-life balance in in Europe. We have the typical 9 to 5, 5 days a
okay,
week job. Um, I've definitely had jobs where we worked late, but mostly that was only because we had a deadline. And
okay,
so leading up to the deadline, we would work overtime to try to get the project done on time. So that would definitely be heights of like more stress versus like if there's no deadline, you try to stick with 8 hours a day. Back before COVID, and I was doing long commutes and working 8 hours, like the whole day would probably be 10 hours with driving. Um, 5 days a week. Now I'm only in the office like 1 day a week. So I do think work-life balance is better while you're saving time from not commuting as often. And I find, at least at my current role, it's very like they really try to maintain that work-life balance. Like you have your personal life. They don't expect us to work late or on the weekends. I find it definitely a pretty healthy like work environment currently. And we haven't talked a lot about the current job again, like the topic of disasters. Like that's not an 8 hour a day phenomenon. Like that happens in the evenings and the weekends. However, our team is not, we're non-operational, so we are not tasked to be working at any hour of the day 24/7. So that does protect our, we don't get burnt out as often, which is nice.
I have a question. I forgot. I just forgot.
I mentioned disasters. Maybe that was.
I will go. No, it will be the second. The first is, you say at some point you have to switch from a technical role to a managerial one. Was something, let's say, you decided to do, let's say, smoothly, or was something, let's say, related to that moment and say, no, if I want to go through progress my career, I need to go to a managerial role?
Yeah, I had a big debate on that. And like I mentioned, I did talk to a few of my like managers, mentors at the time, and they were almost, I felt like, scaring me away from going to that role just because they said it was going to be a difficult project to manage and a lot for somebody who was right out of undergrad or right out of grad school. And they also said, they don't want you to get too far away from the technical side in case, everyone who's fresh out of undergrad or grad school are going to have the freshest knowledge of the latest technologies. And it's going to be harder to compete once you go away for a little bit. And then what if you're like, I don't like management, I want to go back? Then you're kind of a few years out of it. So it was a big debate. I did feel like my personality was more suited to leadership roles. And I had been told that in different jobs that I had, is, I'm a good communicator. I just felt like I naturally kind of take those leadership roles without even meaning to, which kind of made me feel like, okay, management can sound scary or boring to people if they're like, oh, it's spreadsheets and budgets and people management. You're not getting to do the really cool work. But that's not always the case. You can still brainstorm and think through solutions with your team. And at the end of the day, you're the one who's maybe deciding on how certain things should go. So it is important that you still understand the topic. But long story short, at that job, I did go the management route. But at this job, I'm back as like an analyst almost. I'm not managing anybody anymore. I still almost have that same decision again now. Like, do you want to manage or do you want to do like the technical? And I still am figuring that out, even though I've been in my career the last like 10 years. And it's still, I feel like you're always figuring yourself out. It never stops.
Yeah.
And I did manage some interns at one point, with this role. So I did get a little management experience again, but with interns, so it was a little different than managing a full team and project.
What is the best and worst part of management for you?
I did not, personally, I'm not good at reviewing people, like performance reviews. I'm very, I know it's constructive criticism. If you're giving people things that they can work on to grow, if you just tell everyone you did a great job, then they're not going to grow. But I find it hard to say anything that might be negative. So that was tricky for me, especially in my last career. I was really close in age and friendly with my coworkers that then I became manager of. So that's also an interesting dynamic. But in terms of favorite, I guess it would have been like, I felt like this was I felt really proud of the project because you're able to get it from beginning into completion. And then seeing the work be utilized, it's like a proud moment, and seeing the benefits of your work, which you can get as an analyst as well. But having that different ownership of it was nice. But another negative, I guess, is if the project has things wrong with it or people have complaints about it, that's on you. So, even if it was, even if someone on your team maybe messed up something, you're still the one reviewing it, sending out the door. So at the end of the day, it's you take on all the heat you might get. So there's definitely pros and cons.
And now you say, okay, you're working on natural hazard. And how, because you say it's not operational. So what's your role? You are advising other government institution or by processing the data?
Yeah, so we have the NASA Disasters Program, which is a program at NASA that has a few different elements to it. There are applications, which is where we work and fund different projects that can help basically just use science and build different tools to help people make informed decisions when you're planning for disasters. And then we have the disaster response coordination system. I'm going to call that the DRCS for short, because it's a long acronym. I don't want to say that every time. That's the response element, and I'll talk a lot about that. And then we have the disasters portal, which is the GIS remote sensing online portal, where all of our data products that we create for disaster response live open. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to log in, and everything's free to pull into your own systems or download. So that's the third element of this disasters program. At the DRCS, that response system, I am a center response coordinator, which basically means me and one other person at Goddard specifically. We are that liaison between the scientists at Goddard and the disasters program / any of the stakeholders that we might be providing data to. So someone has a question, how do you make this flood data, or can you explain this flood product? Either I can answer that, or I can go to the scientist and kind of get those answers or connect the dots there. So I am like a coordinator in that sense, but also use my GIS degree to help publish data. And also I am on the Landslides team at Goddard. So I help map landslides using different satellite data, Earth observations as well. So I'm also like a subject matter expert. So I have like the different hats. I am subject matter expert, coordinator, GIS person within this cycle. So we do take Earth observation and we create flood data, damage data, landslide data, all sorts of different, or just even satellite data by itself, publish it for response organizations to use on the ground. So we work with all sorts of organizations, and it's worldwide. Like we respond worldwide, not just in the United States. So that's a long story short.
It's interesting. So let's say something happened, landslide, whatever disaster, natural hazard actually, happened when you are asleep. Like a midnight, I don't know, US Maryland time.
Yeah.
What happened? Do you have someone else who works? Do you work shift? Okay. Do you get okay? So what happened in that case?
Yeah. So I actually don't have a government phone, which is good because I won't get any notifications from Teams or email while I'm sleeping. I have to go and log into my government laptop to see any emails that may have come through overnight. So that's basically what will happen. I mean, some people might get the alerts at night. They might choose to sign on, but we're not required to. So when I wake up and sign on at 9 a.m., I'll see an email from an end user that says, hey, we're responding to a landslide that happened in Italy. Can you support with any data products? The first thing we do is check out the capacity of the teams, to make the data. If it's not just publishing satellite data, if we have to do some processing to it. If we're all on vacation, so maybe we can't support. But if we have the capacity to support and there's relevant satellite overpasses, because the timing of that also is important, especially for flooding. The flood may have receded by the time the satellite passes, and then it's not useful. And that's when we'll activate the program. So it does take a request from an end user to have us activate. We might see in the news there was a landslide in Maryland, but if nobody has requested support, then we will not activate and support. But we do have a lot of what we call the near real-time products on our portal that are always updated daily, hourly, whatever the cadence is. And we try to work with people in the blue sky, that's the nice days when they're not responding. so that they understand what they can do and get on their own without even having to email us. There's negatives to that data. It's coarser resolution, for example. Sometimes cloud cover is an issue. But they can use that data at any time without emailing me and asking for support. And like I mentioned, that there's 2 coordinators I say like that because it's the shortened version of it. There's 2 at Goddard, but we are an whole of NASA system, which means all the way out in California, we have centers that have 2 coordinators and have a bunch of scientists. So each center across the US of NASA centers has people that are supporting this effort. So at least we do have the difference between California time and East Coast time to help spread the day out a little bit more. But we were supporting flooding in Bangladesh recently, and the time difference definitely was tricky because they were working different hours than we were working. So to email back and forth and be more specific about what areas they're interested in. If we had a question, we had to wait till the next day to get a response. So that does make it tricky when working globally, that we don't have the 24/7 operations. And there are other agencies like that will cover different products or different support. So we try to use, the Earth observations to create unique products that we don't want to replicate. If something's already out there, we try to work with partners so that we're not duplicating efforts and we're not all mapping landslides in the same place, for example.
Yeah. And how much interaction there is with outside the organization, with US university or other UN, United Nations, other institutions
we
worldwide?
Definitely have. So there's me and like my connections, and that's usually made by at conferences and who I meet when I give presentations or if I have a poster. Times every person in our program that has their own connections, and we have a database of our connections. I work a lot with some like nonprofits, for example. We work with FEMA a lot, of course, since they're the US-based emergency management agency. But some people, they have connections with the UN and other different countries out in the world, and those people will have those connections, and then they'll reach out to that connection to ask us to activate, and that's when I get looped in, even though it's not my connection, but I might be able to help support if it's landslides, for example. So the best way, I would say, I don't know if you can share my email, or we have a email specifically for disaster response coordination system. If you have a request, we share that with people when we're out at conferences, and that's how they can connect with us. It's as easy as sending an email for support.
So you say it's not mandatory for you to respond to an event, but if someone requests it, then do you always say yes?
I haven't seen us say no lately, but again, it is, we would like, we want to help. So it's more about, again, if there's no satellite passes anytime soon, or if the satellite passes we have are cloudy and we don't have synthetic aperture radar or SAR data that can penetrate the clouds, then we might not be able to help. Sometimes if it's we know of other websites that have data that could support. We help basically by sending resources of, our team is over capacity if we're activated for 5 things, for example, which doesn't happen often, but let's just say then I could give resources to at least support, like, have you seen this site or this data set? So we still try to support and, connecting people to right resources if we can activate, but I feel like often we do at least try to activate.
Question probably is due. I wanted to avoid it, but you work at NASA, natural answer. So how much of the movies has affected you? In the way, let me rephrase this. For example, I was definitely through the comments because I watched when I was a kid Armageddon. I thought, wow, there were earth scientists. I say, wow, I need to be earth scientist. I need to save the world. I thought it was a cool job like that. Maybe at NASA is different. So yeah, any of this movie, The Core, Apollo 13, I don't know.
Interstellar is my favorite movie. If you've seen it, I really liked it.
It's too long. I think
it's very long. But it's good to watch in theaters. Back in the day when I watched it in theaters, it was really cool. Actually, the reason I got into environmental science was also because of, well, it was a documentary, not as cool as a movie, but it was a documentary about the Amazon rainforest. And I was in middle school and I was like amazed by this and like wanted to protect the environment. So it motivated me in that sense, but I'm not a huge movie person lately. I know there's like a bunch of different shows, and I watched Hidden Figures. That one was really cool and inspiring.
Yep.
But yeah, I know like when you tell people you work at NASA, everyone thinks, they ask if you're an astronaut. No, I'm like, a lot of people don't know NASA does earth science also.
That's
So they come up to us and ask a lot about space related things. And while I find space really, really cool, it's not, I would say it's more of a hobby, not a, I'm not an expert in it at all. So I try to explain, we use satellites that are in space to look down at the Earth and try to, make a better Earth for, tomorrow, basically. So we still connect with space by using this, satellites, but they're pointed down at us. So that's kind of how I explain it to people. But people definitely think I'm an astronaut. And I tell them I'm afraid of heights. I will not go to space anytime soon.
Okay. And you say, okay, luckily you have like a 9 to 5 job. You don't have to commute every day.
Yeah.
From what my understanding, life-work balance is fine. Let's say in case you have to work, you would have to work every day, going in the office or every day. Do you think it's sustainable work-life balance? I don't know how far are you, but I believe my knowledge of America, you work at least an hour away. You need a car to do everything. So
unless
where
you
do
live
you find the
in
time?
a city, the time to have a life outside of work. Yeah. I know in DC, it's nice. You have the metro you can take to work. It saves you from driving, and there's a lot of traffic here. I mean, I did the 45-minute commute to and from two different cities for five days a week for 4 years. And I thought it was sustainable. I know.
45 for American standards. I think in Europe would be like another country.
I know. It was two different cities, but like I loved where I lived and I loved my job. So it was worth it. I was like, I would prefer to live here and I would prefer to work here. And that was all you knew. We didn't know of this work from home option back before COVID. So it was fine. My coworkers were my friends and like family almost, because you spend more time with them than you do at home a lot of times. So that was, and that was the job that I definitely would have to work a lot when there's a deadline. So I do think there was some burnout. Eventually that happens if you're working late and driving far. A lot of people nowadays will have to go in 3 days a week. That's like a common thing. My fiance has to drive an hour plus, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes, but 3 days a week. But still, it's a lot. And it's mostly because of the traffic. I know you'd be in another country. And so, and then of course, teachers, they have to go in 5 days a week and they can't work from home. So I think it is sustainable depending on what you do and if you love what you do. And we didn't talk a lot about like, I guess, government versus nonprofit and that, but personally, I think like when I was right out of college, like the nonprofit was like the best for me because everyone there was so passionate about the same thing. And it was really nice to be somewhere that everyone was passionate about the same goals and like just working at something that was making the world a better place. And with people, with like-minded people, it was really a cool opportunity and like helped elevate me because it gave me professional development. I learned how to public speak. I was terrible at public speaking. Give you enough practice and throw you in to conferences and give you, I gained that skill and gained experience. So if people are debating out of school, like which to do, I would say try to stick with, if you have a passion, that's awesome. Not everyone finds that with a career. So I would say while you're young and like don't have as many bills, maybe like you can use, do the passion work, gain that experience. I don't think you'll regret it. I mean, that's my experience. So that's just I'm off the soapbox, but that's my advice.
Where do you see, I know it's probably a standard question. What do you want to do in probably in 10 years time? Where do you see yourself? let's say, with your career?
I would love to be at NASA forever. So, but
Okay.
specifically NASA Earth Science, and I love the applied science part of it, where it's not just research to learn new things and to help other fields. I like applying the work with like tangible, like real world applications. So that's ideally what I would stick with is like the earth science topic, whether it's disasters or water quality or air quality or something else, but have it applied. So like getting tangible projects, something that will help people now. That's like what makes me happy. So in 10 years, if that's something I'm doing, that would be awesome. Whether it's project management or not, I'm still figuring that out. As I said, I got my project management professional certificate, which in the US, it's something that you take classes and you take a test, and it's like some letters after your name, and that does help with project management skills. Um, so that I do have those skills to go that route if that's what I choose. There's also NASA has a big research element too, so I could go that route, but I really like that applied work. I like to have an end goal, a project, here's a delivery, let's see it used to help people now. That's what I'm hoping. So that's my broad answer for, and ideally
Okay.
using GIS still, that would be great, right? It's
Yeah.
still a good skill to have, hopefully, in the next 10 years. Who
Uh,
knows? Well, it will have evolved with AI and all sorts of chat GPT.
yeah.
Who knows?
Probably we will not be working yeah, anymore. They
Yeah,
will
there'll be
do everything.
robots then.
Yeah.
No, we still
Rachel,
need, yeah.
thanks. That was my last question. So thanks
Awesome.
for your time, um, for yeah, for being here with us.